I really love making and serving desserts that provide a truly memorable finish to a meal. On today's show, I've got 3 fantastic recipes that are super delicious, and best of all, you can make them all ahead of time. So I'm filing this recipe under things I wish I'd thought about a long time ago. Creme brulee bars. How awesome does that sound? All the great textures and flavors of creme brulee in a really fun new format. So we're going to start by making the crust. It's like a shortbread base, and we'll bake that off while we get our filling ready. So very, very simple. Just flour and sugar and melted butter. Classic shortbread ingredients. Because the custard topping is so flavorful, we don't really need to add in anything else. And I'm not adding in salt because I'm using salted butter. So we're just going to give that a stir. It comes together really easily. And then we'll press it into our prepared pan. You just need to stir it until you can't see any traces of flour. There we go, I think we're ready. So we've got our parchment lined 8x8 pan. I don't recommend doing this in a larger pan as the squares will be a little slender. And you just kind of want to distribute it around the pan, and then we'll press it down into a nice even crust. You may have noticed I use these silicone spatulas a lot. I think they are the wooden spoons of a new generation. I love them. They're so efficient and go in the dishwasher. Highly recommend. I often find them at the dollar store. So now we're just kind of pushing and pressing down on our crust. You want to get right into the corners, just like playing hockey. And if you find you've got any gaps, just scoop some up from another section and move it over. So once your crust is in the pan, you'll need to bake it for about 20 minutes. It doesn't really puff up too much because there's no leavening agent or eggs in it, but it'll get a nice golden brown color and it'll be nice and crisp. All right, I'm happy with that. So we're going to pop our crust in the oven, and I'll be right back. So our crust is out of the oven, and we've let it cool a little bit. It's going to cool a bit more, and while that happens, we'll make our filling. On goes the burner. And we're going to start by whisking together some egg yolks and some sugar. But before we do that, we'll put our cream in the saucepan to heat up. You want to bring it to the point where it's just about starting to steam. You don't want to bring it to a boil. And with this amount of cream, it shouldn't take too long. So I separated the eggs earlier. You can save the egg whites for things like meringues. I have a few different meringue recipes. Pavlova is in the meringue family on my website, constantlycooking.com, if you're looking for ideas so you don't put the egg whites to waste. The yolks just make the custard really rich tasting, so that's why we're not using the whites. And then once our cream is warmed, we're going to add it slowly to the egg yolk mixture. And that's called tempering the yolks. And what that means is it warms them up without actually starting to cook them. If the cream is too hot, you're going to end up with a bowl of scrambled eggs, and that's not what we're going for here. All right, just checking on the cream. The easiest way to monitor the temperature is with a thermometer, but you can also use your pinky finger or just watch for the steam. If you don't heat the cream, you're not going to get as rich a texture in your custard. It will cook up to a custard-like consistency in the oven when you put it on top of the base, but it's much better to work with the warm custard. When you're typically making creme brulee in little ramekins to have the tops torched, you would temper the eggs and then put them back into the pan and cook them a bit more. But I found for this recipe that step isn't needed. So we'll just do the pinky test. Oh, we're there. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to want to drizzle the cream in fairly slowly. Again, so we don't scramble the eggs. And obviously you can see I'm whisking the whole time. It should take a good minute or so for this process. All right, so that's our filling. And now that our crust is thoroughly cooled, we can put it on top, and then we'll bake it until the filling is set. And at that point, the squares can be refrigerated or even frozen until you're ready to cut them up and torch the tops. All right, we'll pop this in the oven, and then I'll show you what the next step looks like. All right, our creme brulee squares or bars have been baked, they've been cooled, they've been cut, and now we're ready for the final step. You can see that I've cut them in not huge portions, they're extremely rich, so I find it's better to serve people one moderately sized one, and they can always go back for seconds. A larger one might just be too much for some people. So we've got our kitchen torch at the ready. If you don't have a torch, you can use a barbecue lighter, believe it or not, or you could also broil them in the oven. Just make sure they're on a heat-proof surface. I've got this beautiful slate plate that I found at the dollar store, and it can withstand the heat of the torch. So we're putting a generous sprinkling of white sugar on each one because that's what's going to melt and give us our brulee topping that you're familiar with from creme brulee. And don't worry about the bits that fall on the side, that's just artistic plating. There, that looks like a pretty good amount. And then on with our torch. That's a lot of fire. I'll turn it down a little. So satisfying to do this step. Don't they look great? You'll want to stop before you set your smoke alarms off though. It's usually best to torch them right before serving, but they can sit for, I would say, an hour and they would be fine. The only detriment is the topping loses its crisp crackle with time. There we go. Creme brulee bars are going to amaze and impress whoever you serve them to.
If you've ever been apple picking at an orchard or visited a harvest festival, you may have tasted the warm, sugary apple cider donuts that seem to be offered at so many autumn events. I'm going to show you how easy it is to make an oven-baked version at home.
The fresher your eggs, the harder it can be to peel them if you hard boil them. Here's 2 ways to solve that problem. Add a pinch of baking soda or a splash of vinegar to the water when you're cooking them, and that will make the whites separate from the shell a lot more easily. It's a darn good thing I didn't know years ago how easy and fun it is to make donuts at home. But now I know I'm never going to stop. So these apple cider donuts are fantastic and really not too hard to make. I'm going to start by getting our dry ingredients ready. I've got some flour here, some of our dry ingredients I should say, and cinnamon, freshly ground cardamom, which I really love, and salt. And we'll just stir those together and then set them aside. To be added in later, I've got a half a cup of apple cider. I've never tried making these with apple juice. I don't think you would get as good a flavor. What I recommend is go ahead and buy that jug and then portion it out and freeze it, and you'll find lots of uses. It's great for marinating meats and so on. This was 3/4 of a cup of cider. I boiled it down to concentrate the flavor, and then I cooled it. And now we're going to cream together the butter and the sugar. And this makes for a really nice texture for our donuts. So we've got a little bit of granulated sugar and some brown sugar. And I'll just give these a little persuasion, and then we'll get our beater in here. You can use a stand mixer if you have one. If you are ever in the market for a new hand beater, highly recommend these cordless ones. Amazing, rechargeable, and it's just so nice to not fuss with the cord. It's a little cool in my kitchen today, so the butter wasn't quite as soft as perhaps it should have been, but the heat generated by the beaters will be enough to soften it. This is similar to the step that's at the beginning of many cookie recipes, so you're looking for that same mixture where all the sugar is incorporated into the butter. All right, I can't see any dry bits of sugar anymore, so now we're going to add in the eggs, and that will help the mixture come together in a nice creamy texture. And I'm going to put them in one at a time. All right, now we'll add our second egg and a splash of vanilla at the same time. Not too much vanilla because you don't want to overpower the apple cider flavor. All right, we've got a great creamy mixture going on here. So now we're going to add the flour in a few additions, a bit at a time. All right, the flour is mostly incorporated. We've got a really stiff batter here. However, we haven't added our cider yet. I'm just going to scrape down the sides of the bowl to make sure everything gets mixed in. And now with the beater running, I'll slowly drizzle in the cider. It smells so good, the cider. You really get that rich aroma, and I know it's going to be reflected in the taste. All right, we've got our nice thick batter going on. I'm just going to run the beaters for a second to clean them off. Okay, and now we're going to make sure we're ready to fill our donut pan. These are surprisingly inexpensive, and if you do get into the idea of making donuts, you probably won't mind purchasing it. You can absolutely use a muffin pan instead, or even a mini muffin pan if you want to make almost like little donut holes. I have sprayed mine with a little vegetable oil. These sprayers are also not expensive and super useful, especially if you're into air frying. Now I'm going to transfer the batter to, you could use a piping bag, but I'm just going to use a Ziploc bag, and it's easiest if you have it propped up like this. And then you just kind of want to spoon it into the bag. If you have helping hands in the kitchen, they could also hold the bag open for this step. All right, we'll pop the bag out of here, zip it up. And then we're just going to snip one corner, and that just essentially turns it into a piping bag. And you're aiming to have your donut compartments about 2/3 full. All right, we've got our donut pan filled, and don't worry if they look a little messy. When they puff up in the baking process, they'll all come out like perfect round beauties. Into the oven we go for about 12 to 15 minutes. All right, look at these beauties. They're out of the oven, they smell amazing, and now we're going to do the final magic step, and that is to prepare a cinnamon and cardamom and sugar mixture to roll them in. It's that simple, just stir them together. If you're a big fan of ginger, you could add that in too. I find that with apples, any of those warming spices are terrific. So I have found that the best thing to extricate the donuts with is a little plastic takeout fork, and then you just dunk them in, give them a little toss. I sort of heap the topping up. You don't want to have them absolutely saturated. They just want to be coated a little bit. Let's see if we can do a couple here for you. And here you go. Our beautiful apple cider donuts are going to absolutely disappear as soon as I bring them out.
I really, really love pies, but often find a traditional sized one is just too large and tempting. My solution? A fast and easy mini pie, which doesn't require any special equipment to make and is perfect for one or two.
when it comes to desserts, one of the things I hear most often when I'm teaching virtual cooking classes, especially my corporate classes, is that people don't want to make pies because it's just too much work or it's too much pie. So here's my solution, a small pie. It's so easy and it's the perfect for, I say 2 people, maybe for you it's a 1-person pie. So we're going to start by making our pie crust, and you'll see how small the quantities are of the ingredients. We've got our flour, a very small amount of sugar, and this is about 2.5 tablespoons of butter that I grated and tossed with a bit of the flour and then just put it back in the fridge. So very, very easy. And to that, I'll give it maybe a quick toss, and then we're going to add about 2 tablespoons of very cold water. You might need a little bit more just depending on the heat of the day or whatever, but we'll start with 2. And we'll just give that a quick stir. And again, it doesn't look like very much, but once you roll it out, it's the perfect amount of pastry. Now, when you're making pastry, it's always great to allow time for it to rest, and that's for 2 reasons. One is that the flour gets hydrated with the moisture, and it's going to bake up more evenly and with a better texture, and it also gives a chance for the fat, in this case butter, but the same would apply to shortening or lard, to get chilled, and it'll be easier to roll out. All right, so we've got our nice shaggy pastry there, and I'm just going to turn it out onto this plastic wrap and gather it up into a ball and tuck it in the fridge. You can use whatever pastry recipe you like. I like a butter pastry for this, but if you're more comfortable with your tried and true grandma's recipe, go ahead. You can either scale it down with a little bit less flour, less of everything, or simply make the full batch and then just cut it into smaller portions. Oh, this pastry feels amazing. It's just coming together so perfectly. And the reason you want to shape it into a disc is that when you go to roll it out, it's going to be already in the shape that you want to get the circle that is the goal. All right, there's my cute, tiny little bit of pastry, and that will be going into the fridge. In the meantime, I have one here that I've already rolled out earlier today, so we'll set that aside and we'll get our filling ready. Now you can put any kind of filling in these free-form tarts that you like. I really love peaches and blueberry as an example. In the wintertime, I sometimes crave the flavors of summer, so that's why we're going strawberry rhubarb today. So I've got some nice thawed rhubarb from my freezer, and I'm just leaving the juice behind here. You can work with frozen rhubarb, you don't have to thaw it, and just make sure it's cut in fairly small pieces because that's proportionate to the pie. And then we'll slice in our strawberries. Not sure how many it's going to take, but we'll start with probably 4 and we'll see where we're at. Do one last strawberry just to make sure we have enough filling. All right, so now you want the fruit to cook up and become a little bit sauced, I'll say, in there. So we're going to combine a little bit of cornstarch and sugar, and it's easiest if you stir them together before you add them in. And just a little bit of salt. Amazingly, salt can bring out a lot of flavor in fruit, so it's a great idea to include it. And a little tiny squeeze of lemon juice. There we go. We'll just borrow this spoon and give it a stir until all the fruit is nicely coated with the cornstarch. And what that does is as the juices come out of the fruit while it cooks, it helps to thicken those juices and you get almost like a lovely glaze in the middle of the pie. All right, so now with our beautiful, this is probably about an 8-inch round of pastry. We're going to just heap the filling up in the middle, leaving about a 1-inch border all the way around the edge. And make sure you add in any juices that are left. There, I'm very happy with that fruit distribution. So now what we're going to do is just fold the edge of the pastry up a little bit over the fruit to corral it and keep it in place. And you just pleat it as you go. This is considered a rustic or free-form tart, so it doesn't have to look as though it's come out of a machine. It should be have little ragged edges and even little cracks in the pastry. That's all part of the beauty of these pies. I happen to think they look amazing like this. And last but not least, we're going to brush a little beaten egg yolk on the crust so it turns really perfect golden brown. I prefer these silicone brushes to the old-fashioned bristle pastry brushes, as I find that these are just more hygienic. You can put them in the dishwasher and they don't retain any aromas from previous foods. So if you're using them for barbecue sauce and pie, you don't have any crossover. I do find it's best to cook these pies as soon as they're assembled rather than letting them sit, because the fruit juice will start to seep into the pastry. All right, our beautiful little tart is ready to go into the oven. All right, we've taken our perfect little mini tart out of the oven, and oh my gosh, doesn't this look beautiful? You might see recipes like this sometimes called galettes or crostadas. It's all the same thing, just different countries' interpretation, but it's the perfect way to enjoy a little bit of pie and not have it lingering in your house for days. Almost everyone loves a little sweet treat at the end of the meal, and I hope that the recipes I've made for you today give you some new and delicious inspiration. Whether you choose these impressive creme brulee bars, the fun and easy apple cider donuts, or this fantastic little freeform mini tart, I'm sure you'll find the perfect sweet finish for your next menu.